Mia, welcome to In the Heart of the Ball. It's an absolute pleasure having you here, and it's an honour to have you here today. I know how difficult, for a better word, this is going to be for you, and my heart's bursting that you actually feel safe enough and trust me enough to actually sit here in my studio today and have this belly-to-belly conversation. So thank you. How are you feeling?
Oh, Lindsay. Well, for starters, I feel like I already know you after our call on the phone the other day. Look, mixed emotions because grief is a big thing. And as you and I discussed, we don't do it very well, at all. And it's, I don't know. I've got mixed emotions, I guess, being here today, but positive too, because I think people need to hear other people's stories.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So let's go back. Let's go back to life before Ollie. So we can paint a picture of who you were before you had your beautiful boy. What was life like that for you then?
Life before Ollie. I grew up in the country girl, moved to Brisbane, couldn't get out of the country quick enough really, but as the saying goes, you can take the girl out of the country, but you cannot take the country out of the girl. And look, I fell into a career in property, which I absolutely love and thrive on. And I tell everybody that the property industry is my family, essentially. And I lived and breathed my career. I worked really, really hard to get where I was and build, I guess, a brand for myself within the property industry. But I always wanted to be a mother, always wanted to be a mum. But I wasn't also going to let that interfere with my career because I figure as a woman, why can't you do it both? So my little boy, when he was born, he came to property council meetings. In fact, he came to the Future Directions meetings and he was coined the youngest member of the Future Directions Committee, which is really cool. The Future Directions Committee was a committee of young and upcoming property people under the age of 35. Now, I got on the committee just before I turned 36. Woohoo! So I got kicked off when I turned 37, but that was okay. But Ollie,
you got on there,
yeah,
though.
I did. I got on the Future Directions Committee. But I loved it because back in those days, taking a baby along to a committee meeting, let alone taking him into work, was so not the done thing ever. And I look right back to the beginning of my career in property, and we really were, a friend of mine in the industry, we really were at the forefront of this whole women in diversity thing. I remember doing a function. I was just this executive assistant working for Knight Frank, and I wanted to get all these women together and I wanted to invite this woman along. Her name was Kathy McDermott, and she was like the bureau-in-chief of the Financial Review, and a female and pregnant, and her husband was a house husband. So I got Kath along to speak to this room full of women in various different roles, in various different corporates, about the fact that she was a working mum and she was doing it both. She was a mum, but she worked, and her husband, Ronnie, bless him, was the house husband, basically. But again, that was really early in the piece. So even in 2009, when Ollie was born, that was not a done thing, taking a child to a meeting or to work. But he came everywhere. He even came to property council breakfasts, lunches, but he was just part of the furniture at that stage. And I love it now because I sit on the Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Committee for Property Council and have for 14 years now. And I love the fact that these young girls bring their babies, these young women bring their babies to meetings now. Yeah, it is, and it's the way it should be.
Yeah, for sure.
Why do we have to give up our careers just because we have babies? And it's not like he was loved any less. He was loved more. You know, he was loved more because I valued every moment I had with that little boy, and he came everywhere with me, everywhere.
Yeah, I love that. So let's go back to when you found out you were pregnant with Ollie. Was that obviously a welcome surprise, but how were you feeling in that moment when you found out?
So we decided we were going to have a baby, and I fell pregnant within 5 months. And unfortunately, my first pregnancy, I had a miscarriage. So I had my first scan, and there was no heartbeat, and the fetus was the size of a 6-week-old, not a 12-week-old. And that was really heartbreaking, like really heartbreaking. And I guess in my relationship at that point in time, there should have been alarm bells, because I had a partner who said to me, well, it wasn't really a baby. I don't know why you're so upset. Anyway, that aside, 3 months later, I was pregnant with Ollie, and I was stoked. And first pregnancy, I didn't want to know whether it was a boy or girl, but of course, second time around, because I'd lost the first, I wanted to know. I so wanted to know. And I was so excited. At first, I really wanted a girl because I'm the older of two. I've got a younger brother. But anyway, I got told I'm having a little boy, and it was picking names. I had that room set up. I was so excited. Did I love pregnancy? No way. It is the worst thing ever.
Why was that? Was
24/7 sick, morning sickness. It was just It was just revolting. 24/7. I felt sick. Felt like I had a constant hangover the whole entire time. It was just gross. And then to be told that I couldn't have him naturally because I had placenta previa, and I'm like, but I'm not too posh to push. I will give it a go.
Yeah.
But no, it wasn't going to be the case, unfortunately. So on the 21st of August 2009 at 9 o'clock in the morning, I went in to have a C-section, and my little boy was born at 9:21 on the 21st of August in 2009, and out he came, and he had red hair. It's like, what the?
What was his weight?
He was 7 pound 2, which in this day and age is small, because babies seem to be getting bigger and bigger. Mind you, I was a 9 pound 1 baby. So my poor mother, yes.
At home on the lounge room floor.
But you know, from the moment I held him, I was in love, totally in love. You know,
so that 9 months of sickness and everything.
Yeah, it just all disappears.
Yeah.
And it's funny, you talk to mothers who have had babies naturally, and they don't talk about the pain, because once they've got that baby in their arms, they just fall in love.
Yeah.
You know, and I would love to have had another, but you know, the relationship, it wasn't to be, and I'm certainly not going to have a baby as a Band-Aid solution in a relationship. So.
Yeah, of course. So you have this beautiful redhead bundle of joy.
Yeah.
And did you have, although you're in the corporate world and Ollie went everywhere with you, was there a time frame that you stayed at home and just savoured every moment? Did you have a bit of that downtime with him?
Lindsay, you're going to roll your eyes at me. So here I am in hospital, just having had my baby, and everyone in my office knew that I was having a baby on the 21st of August at 9 o'clock in the morning. I was booked in for a C-section, and my phone was ringing with, I thought, congratulations, and I've answered the phone to a work phone call going, oh, Mia, you know that function we're having with the Minister for Infrastructure in a couple of weeks' time? And I've gone, yes. And then he sort of stopped. He said, and how are you? I said, well, I'm pretty good for a woman who's just had a baby 2 hours ago. And I was like, do we have to have
a
this?
C-section?
Yeah, a C-section, yes. So I've just been wheeled out from a C-section, and I'm answering phone calls less than 2 hours to a work phone call. Do I regret that? Of course I do. But, you know, should I have been answering my phone? Maybe not. But I didn't think it was someone ringing up with work stuff, to be quite honest. So I was back in the office literally not even 2 weeks after I had my son for a function with the Minister for Infrastructure and Planning, who was Sterling Hinchliffe at the time. Ollie was in my office with me, this tiny little baby, and I remember my boss coming in, Jeff Parker, lovely, lovely man, Cotty Parker, but he was very traditional. Mothers should be mothers, you know. I'm like, whatever. And he said to me, what are you going to do with this baby, Mia? And I said, I'm just going to leave him in here and close the door, Jeff. And he looked mortified.
He'll be fine.
Here I am 2 weeks after having a baby, speaking at this function with the Minister for Infrastructure and Planning, because my directors of an architectural practice couldn't get up there and do it themselves. My boobs are like bloody rock melons. And and going, oh my goodness, who is this person? So in reality, we had no maternity policy in place, and architects were pretty bad at that. In fact, the whole property industry was really bad at it at that point in time. So I tried to negotiate because there were a couple of women.
Were you commission-based then?
No, I've never been commission-based,
Right.
never. I've always been salary-based, and even now in the roles that I do with my own business, I don't take commission. It is a retainer-based, I will get the results for you. So,
Yeah.
so none of that. So, here I am, baby, my boss, then basically a business that really didn't support mothers at all. So it was like I wanted to come back to work part-time, so I had to write a proposal to my boss and the rest of the board about working a 7-day fortnight, so 3-day, 4-day. And I'm thinking to myself, why do I have to do this? I worked so hard for this business.
Still going to get the job done.
That's right. And I didn't get maternity leave. They said you can have some time off, but you've still got to work 20 hours a week for it to get paid half pay. So I was working part-time less than 2 weeks after having my child, basically. And then I got poached. So I had another business come to me and say, hey, Mia, we're looking for a BD in the Brisbane area. Are you interested? I said, well, I've just had a baby. These are the hours that I want to work. So this company had tried to pinch me a few times from the architect that I was working for. So he came up from Melbourne. I handed him my baby and we negotiated while he was holding Ollie. And so I did. I went back to work on a 7-day fortnight, 3-day, 4-day. Was it difficult? Yeah, sometimes, absolutely. But you know what? There is no better worker than a mother, who's got
Time
a shorter
management.
week. Yep, absolutely.
Down to a T.
We just make it work. We throw those balls in the air and we catch what we can catch.
Yeah.
So, yes, look, do I regret going back so soon? Absolutely, particularly now that we're in the situation that we're in. But he just fit into everything. Like the whole entire property industry knew my child, knew Ollie, because he was at everything. And if not, I was on the phone in the car on the way home and I'd be going, oh, I've got Ollie in the car. And they'd be, hi, Ollie, how are you? And,
Gorgeous.
even a gurgling little baby, everybody in the industry got to hold him as a baby at the Future Directions Committee meetings. He was in his little capsule. It was just how I made it work for me.
It's interesting that you said that because obviously, as you know, I used to be in property and development, and hindsight's a wonderful thing. But I look back much similar to yours. I had a natural birth with Evie, but it's very timely in the sense that Glenn was in the Navy, so it all had to follow, and it did, thankfully. But literally gas and air, answering to clients on the bed, in agony, in labour, with them because the property was about to fall over because a few conditions hadn't, come to head, kind of thing. And I just think now, I look back to that, I think, why did I take that call? And secondly, then when I'm actually in labour and they proceed to say, I know, but... And I have to take 100% accountability for that because I, taught to them. And then afterwards, Evie was in Darwin. She was literally 2 days old and she was at my first auction, which was beautiful.
Yes.
Like you said, you do what you need to do.
Yes.
And obviously, hindsight is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
But at least you were in an environment where you could include Ollie and do all the things you needed to do, which is gorgeous as well. And fortunate enough that you were able to establish that you were probably in the wrong role with the wrong company and, were given the opportunity to go elsewhere, which embraced that, which is a beautiful thing.
Yes.
So that's how life went for you for a while. You were obviously with Ollie's dad.
Yeah. I was with Ollie's dad up until probably just before he turned 2 years old.
Right.
And I think our relationship was pretty strained after I had Ollie. In fact, it was probably pretty strained even before I had Ollie. He was messaging women that he was actually, because he was in the Navy too, as you know, and he was messaging a woman that he had gone out with in the Navy, telling her that I had had a miscarriage, and she had sent him a message back, which I inadvertently saw, saying, oh, you know, having a child out of wedlock, blah, 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 that's not on. That's why I've had 2 terminations. And I'm like going, well, why did you get pregnant in the first place? When I read it, I was mortified. And I was mortified that he was sharing our story with strangers as well.
Private.
Private details. And any man, and I won't say...
So was this, sorry, Mia, was this after you'd had Ollie?
No, this is before.
After
and
your
I was,
miscarriage?
Yeah, after I was pregnant with Ollie when this was going on. And so really the grief started at an early stage because I was being treated terribly. And back then there was no term coercive control, but that's exactly what I was in, a coercive control relationship. And I earned 3 times more than what he did, so I was the breadwinner in the family. That is why I went back to work so soon. And he always says, but I did 1 day a week at home, a fortnight. Well, good for you.
Yeah.
1 day.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
I remember if we ever had to go anywhere, I would be the one up and he would be sitting there just looking at me going, well, I'm ready to go. And I'd be going, well, is the nappy bag packed? Is this done? Is that done? No, he's just sitting there going, oh, I'm ready.
Yeah, awesome.
And then he referred to his son as a FUCK trophy for the first 12 months of his life. And I think that's when it screamed
Would
to me.
he say that openly in front of you?
Yep. Yes.
How did that make you feel?
Terrible. It was like, you do not deserve to be a father. Who are you? You know, who are you?
Why do you think do you think it was part of being a mum for the first time and obviously your focus is not 100% on him, on the dad anymore, thank goodness, but it's on this beautiful boy. But why do you think you put up with that in that moment?
Because you're scared and you're scared of being a mum and being alone. But the day that we went up the beach, I would have been 6 months after Ollie was born, and this was probably the beginning of the end, and I only stuck around for, another 18 months, silly me. He said to me on the beach in front of 2 other friends that were in the Navy with him, Mia, you used to be so slim and trim, but now when I look at you, all I see is cellulite.
No. What?
Yeah.
The actual...
Yeah.
What did his... Not that it matters. What did his mates say?
The female who was in the Navy, she had always said to me, I'd never met her before, and when I had met her, she said to me, what on earth is someone like you doing with him? She hated him. She hated him in the Navy, you know, absolutely could not stand him. And she's still a friend of mine to this day. In fact, she's one of the people who encouraged me to set up a charity.
Wow.
But, you know, to say that to your partner who's just had a baby 6 months, that, you know, and I had no support. I had no support in getting back to the gym or anything like that. I did everything for that little boy. Yet, hang on a minute. I took 1 day off a fortnight to be at home with him. Now, he was so tiny. All he had to do was feed him and change a nappy. I can guarantee to you that he would have been sitting in his office on his computer, chatting up whoever would listen that whole entire time. And then one day this penny dropped and I said, we're in the car. Ollie was tiny, like still a baby in the back of the car, not even 2. And I said, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't even like you. We sleep in separate rooms. It's like living with a flatmate that I don't even like. We're done. We're over.
Yeah, it's not like you even like him and you're best of friends and it's...
No, and we hadn't been intimate since before I fell pregnant with Ollie. I think we had sex once in like 3 years. And so he was probably finding it elsewhere, in all honesty, Lindsay. I would think, because there's no way, a male is going to do without for that period of time. And it wasn't from a lack of me trying. I tried. And I used to even put Ollie to bed early so we could have a date night because, men they do feel left out in that beginning. And I totally used to get that. So I'd want to do a date night. But sometimes this tiny little baby's going, well, I'm not going to have a bar of you and Dad having a date night. I'm going to cry or whatever it might be, even though we had a pretty perfect little child. So it was incredibly hard, and it was incredibly hard making that decision that was it. I was going to go. And I'll never forget, he never ever used to ring me at work, but he rang me at work that day and said, are you sure this is what you want? And I went, yeah, we are done. Then I had to live under the same roof as him for the first 5 weeks. And I took Ollie away for the weekend and I came home and he had knocked everything off in the house. So he had moved out, he'd taken the TV, the media centre, everything that wasn't tied down, he had taken.
And left you there with Ollie?
And left me there with this little boy. No TV, no
God.
nothing. No, nothing. On a property, 1.5 acres, me and this little boy. And I'm very lucky that I've got a very wonderful support network around me who just wrapped me in cotton wool, and we needed to sell the house.
That's punishment, that though. You know that's his way of punishing you in a very wounded, childlike manner.
Yeah. And then he fought. Then he decided, right, I'm going to fight to spend some time with this baby. So his solicitor came to mine and said, my wants a night with his son. Now, Ollie was tiny, still in nappies, and my solicitor said to me, whatever you do, Mia, do not pack him a bag. He is going to provide for this child. He needs to provide. Don't you pack him anything. He needs to step up. So I didn't. It's the hardest thing I've ever done in my whole entire life. But you know what he did? I marked the nappy. He sent that child back in the same nappy. Yeah. So you tell me, did he ever really want Ollie? No, he didn't. He was taking that little boy to hurt me. That's all he was doing. All he was doing. And anyway, when we had this house that we had to sell, I had a tenant who was happy to move into it because at that point in time we were in the GFC. So, properties had gone, plummeted. So we were never going to make the money that we'd paid for on this house. But he would not sign the rental agreement to rent it to somebody. Yeah.
Again, punishing you, but in turn shooting himself in the foot.
Yeah, absolutely. So he wouldn't do that. So we had to sell that house for $80,000 loss.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think it was even more. It was $92,000 loss. The mortgage insurance covered some of that, and the bank actually wrote off the rest. So we're pretty lucky. But then all of a sudden I'm getting calls from the mortgage insurers saying, well, you owe $80,000 to us, and it just, so I was never rid of him at all, whereas we could have rented that house out, and yes, we would have been financially tied together for a period of time,
but you could have had an agent take care of that and just had as little involvement
and sold it when the market turned, which it did, and we could have made money and walked away from it, but no, punish. He broke me financially, emotionally, in every way possible. But I moved back to the north side of Brisbane and I picked myself back up and I made it work. And then the fight came with the property settlement. He wanted visiting rights every 2 weeks and a dinner date in the middle of the week, which all that did was upset Ollie being in the middle of the week. But look, I did what I needed to do. He was still his father, so, I let him have that time. And yes, was it a struggle for me? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Was it a smooth process? No, it was not. But I used to get a little boy after every second weekend with his father back that wasn't my child, that needed to readjust. It was so, so hard. So I did the right things. I went and got a psychologist. I got the father and his partner involved in that process. And then when my little boy has started school, his stepmother or the partner has come to pick my child up from school one day and said, oh, Ollie, we went to see your psychologist today. You're supposed to be bringing 2 families together, not tearing them apart. So this is the mental torture that little boy...
How old was Ollie at that age, sorry?
He would have been in grade 1 or 2, so maybe 6.
Wow. such a weighted statement on anyone's shoulders, let alone a little boy who should, his biggest concern should be what's he got in his lunchbox and who is he playing with that day.
Yeah. Just
mind blown.
I lost it. Absolutely lost it. And then even to the point where one day she was running late to pick him up on their weekend and he was missing. So he hadn't gone down to after school care because he knew he wasn't supposed to be there. And she's turned up at school and Ollie's like missing in action because she hasn't turned up on time to pick him up. Now, wouldn't you message the mother and say, hey, Mia, I'm running late. Can you get Ollie to go to after school care? But no, none of that. And then when I pulled her up on it, I got nothing but abuse saying, I'm looking after your child. Well, you're not looking after my child because you're not even there.
That's the choice that you made, by the way.
That's right. Even going into school to tell the school after I had Ollie's eyes checked and things like that because he was, not necessarily adjusting to school, which he did in the end. In primary school, everybody loved him. His teachers adored him. She's found it fit to go into school and go, oh, well, Ollie's had his eyes tested, blah, blah. Well, she wasn't there. I did that. Who was she to comment on my child? So, yes, I did have a massive problem with another woman in my child's life, particularly in those early days, because she wasn't very collaborative either with me, and his father was never, like that relationship was never going to be okay, ever, 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 ever. They tortured that little boy, just in things that they said to him, I used to get the blame for a lot of things. I used to get it thrown back at me. Well, you've said this, you've turned him against my partner. But I didn't at all whatsoever. My child wasn't a stupid child. He worked it out, particularly as he got older.
And you don't, and that's the thing, kids are so aware. You don't need to be saying much at all. They just want the simple things. They want stability.
Yes.
They want loyalty. They want to know that they're loved unconditionally and their home is their safe place. They don't want parents playing each other off.
No.
And on that, had you have been that parent playing them off, then he would have stood up to that with you as well. You would have seen that behaviour back on you.
Yes.
So where's the benefit in that?
That's right. And then at 10 years of age, so I had a child who was back and forth every second weekend. And look, they at one point in time at Easter time we used to swap the major holidays. So I would have Ollie for Easter one year and he would have him for Christmas, and then vice versa the next year, which was great. And then one year they've decided they're going to go to the Simpson Desert, and it was my Easter with Ollie. And I said, well, I absolutely take him, but I'm having Christmas if you guys are taking him at Easter. And they were going away for 4 weeks. And why would I stop that? What an experience for a young child going into the Simpson Desert. Fantastic, They ended up only going for, I think, 3 weeks because there had been floods and whatnot through. But Ollie had a great time, fantastic time. But because they'd booked 4 weeks, rather than taking him for the 4 weeks, no, they palmed him straight back to me on that week that they came back early, which I just found astounding because they had wanted him for 4 weeks, but all of a sudden now they didn't.
Don't worry about what you've organised.
No, none of that. But I mean, I was fine because I was glad to have
You missed him.
Yeah, I missed him. I was glad to have my little boy home. And then when he turned 10, there was always difficulties with that adjustment when he came home. And when he turned 10, I got a text message from his father saying, coming to our house isn't a punishment, And I texted him back and I said, well, unfortunately, that is not how Ollie sees it. So he decided to force Ollie's hand and say, well, maybe he needs to make up his mind where he wants to live then. So I said, fine. Ollie, where do you want to live? He goes, I'm living with you, Mum. So he made that decision. But when he made that decision, then he got ostracised, completely ostracised. So he got told...
Stonewall.
Oh, totally. I said, well, regardless of where he wants to live, who cares? That shouldn't matter. If you're going to the beach or you're doing something on a weekend and would like Ollie to come and spend time with his 2 little half-brothers, because they had 2 more children... just ring me. I'm not going to say no. I'm never going to stop him seeing those little boys. He absolutely adored his brothers, absolutely adored them, even though they were quite a bit younger than him. But his father said, well, I'm sorry, Ollie. Well, firstly, I said to Ollie, we need to ring your dad to tell him why you don't want to come anymore. He needs to understand that. Or we go and have a cup of coffee. Ollie's like, no, don't want to see him. I don't want to have a cup of coffee. Let's just ring him. So I said to Ollie, okay, well, you write down why you don't want to go anymore. So this little boy at 10 years of age writes down, I don't feel loved when I'm there. I don't feel like I'm part of the family. I feel like you don't take any interest in the things that interest me. And when the boys do something wrong, I'm the one that gets the blame. So this little boy rings his father, puts him on speaker, says to Mum, don't you say a word. I've gone, no, I'll just sit here. Now, I've never recorded a phone conversation in my life between him and his father, ever, never, ever, not the right. I did this time. And so that little boy sat there.
Well, in that instance, I don't think there's many parents who wouldn't do the same, because you're kind of just protecting yourself.
Oh.
If there's any no different than a paper trail.
Yes.
You email, communicate,
Yes.
so it's always there. Then you've got to have some kind of backup, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Things get misconstrued, especially with a 10-year-old little boy who shouldn't be having to make that phone call anyway.
No, that's right. And this brave little boy, he rang his father and said, well, Dad, I'm ringing to tell you why I don't want to come anymore. And he articulated all those points that he'd written down by himself. I sat there listening, my heart breaking, completely breaking for this little boy. And at the very end of the conversation, his father says to him, well, Ollie, you're not supposed to like your parents. When I was young, I. It was all about him, rather than, Ollie, I'm really sorry to hear
like
that. Yeah. How do we change things? How can we make things better? And it was never going to get any better. And then he said to Ollie, well, I'll sort out the financial stuff with your mother. Mind you, he never paid child support in those early days. And when he did, it was like $25 a month, which is like, I just said,
get yourself an ice cream.
Yeah, it costs you more in admin fees for child support to administer that. Don't worry about it, basically. So I'll talk to your mother about finances, and, adult decisions come with adult consequences. So you can't see your little brothers and you can't see your grandparents, and that's it. Have a nice life.
Wow.
And my little boy said, and it was my proudest mother moment, one of them, well, thanks for understanding, Dad. I was so proud of him just for that response.
So he was the adult in that instance.
Absolutely, he was. Absolutely. But he shouldn't be the adult because he was just a little boy.
No.
And so Ollie didn't. He didn't see his father then for a long time. I reached out to his father's parents and told them what the conversation had entailed about the fact that he wasn't allowed to see them. And they said, that's nonsense. Your family, you can come and see us anytime. Now, did I have a great relationship with them? Not necessarily. I thought his mother was just as crazy as he was, to be honest. But that didn't matter to me because Ollie loved them. Absolutely, yeah. Lindsay. He absolutely adored them. So for me, taking him over and putting myself through that couple of hours of pain was worth it for my child.
Yeah.
I didn't care. And they were lovely to me, and I will always say that, they are different, but they were lovely, and they loved Ollie, and that is all that mattered. As for seeing his little brothers, they just would not budge. In fact, the stepmother sent Ollie a text message after that phone call saying, don't be angry at your father. It was me who said you can't see your brothers, because how would they know that you not wanting to come here anymore isn't their fault?
How about we just sit down and have open conversation and we...
How about the fact that... they would only know that if they said that.
That's right.
I was mortified.
I mean, especially if they're younger than Ollie, and Ollie only being 10. Kids only, the rule of thumb with children as well at such a young age, you go on a need-to-know basis.
Yes.
There's so much stuff they don't need to know. They don't need to be kept in the dark, and, honesty is the best policy. But there's some things they just don't need to know.
No.
And you can have open conversation
Yeah.
in childlike ways, enough for them to be able to comprehend and
Yes.
simplify it so it's easy and the weight's not on their shoulders, because sometimes it's the not knowing that has so much weight on them.
But if they were good people, Lindsay, when I said, surely we can catch up in the park once a fortnight or do something, or if you're going to the beach on a weekend, ring. I was never going to say no, ever, never, ever going to say no, ever. You know, I think he needed a relationship, particularly because he had two little brothers, you know. So if the shoe was on the other foot and he had decided to stay with them,
Oh, you'd
yes,
be there at every opportunity, wouldn't you?
I would have been devastated. But on that flip side, yes, absolutely. I would have been reaching out at every opportunity to say, hey, I'm headed camping this weekend, or I'm doing this, or I'm doing whatever. But no, he was ostracised completely by them, completely. But then when he
Awful.
started high school, all of a sudden, Dad goes, oh, I'm going to try and reach out to him. So he had seen them twice in 4 years, and that is only because on a Boxing Day, he'd go to his grandparents and they would say to me, well, we're going over there to his father's place for Boxing Day. Is it okay if Ollie goes? And I said, as long as he's comfortable going over there, I do not have a problem. And Ollie used to always say to me, well, I'm not going to see Dad, Mum, I'm going to see my little brothers. Aww. And then his father would ignore him the whole time he was there anyway. So you tell me, again, who is the adult in this whole situation? And then when he did reach out, it was berating him on text messages. You know, if he wasn't at school or for some reason or whatever, it'll be so you're sitting at home just eating lollies and gaming and getting fat. And it was just berate. In fact, I have got a phone full of text messages from his father to this little boy, absolutely just letting him have it. Oh, we all make mistakes. Let me back in. Give me a second chance. Blah, 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 blah. Well, Ollie didn't want that at all whatsoever. There was so much hurt there. And even watching him when a friend of mine or someone would come over, and if his father came up in the conversation, watching the mood change. Like, I'd go from a child who was on a high to his father coming into the conversation, and it would just take a massive dive. You know, massive dive.
Well, that speaks volumes in itself, doesn't it?
It does. He was so tortured by them, but they take absolutely no responsibility in where we are today. None. Not one iota. Not one.
Well, I mean, there's no responsibility leading up to the events that unfolded, so there's definitely going to be no accountability or responsibility afterwards.
No.
So Ollie's at high school. Mm-hmm. What's his, obviously he's at home with you in his safe place, and you're his number one. You've got this beautiful relationship, and, you speak so highly of him in situations you've said you've been in where people comment on, they'd see you mentioned the cruise ship you went on, and people see, and comment on what a beautiful relationship that you have, and it was so evident to everybody.
Yes.
So when Ollie's at home with you, and then when he's at school, what was that period of time like for him? Was it fairly evident that he was starting to struggle at school and struggle within himself?
By the time he hit grade 7, so high school, and I still think year 7 is way too young for them to be shifting into high school.
Yeah, it's huge.
And I know we're just moving in, Queensland's just moving in line with the rest of the country, but they're still babies at 13 years of age.
Sorry, Mia, to interrupt you there. No. Was it a separate high school or altogether, different campus?
Separate, totally separate campus. So we live on the north side of Brisbane. So he went to, and I'm happy to talk about this, he went to Aspley East State High School. Aspley East State School, where I loved it. There was a teacher over there who didn't even teach him, and she reached out to me after I lost him, and she said to me, Mia, Ollie used to even come onto the school campus with, one of his mates who had a younger sibling at the school, and he would always go and speak to Mrs. Gladstone just about life, about his dogs, about the relationship with his father and how it wasn't great. And she said, I loved him. She said, because he would just come and chat. And even at parent-teacher interviews, which used to make my heart warm, I'd be sitting there with one teacher and then his teachers from the previous year would be beside me and they go, come here, Mia, come over here. And they go, you know what? He's one of the only children that still says hello to us, you know, and we were the teachers from the year before.
Gorgeous.
So he had the most beautiful nature of just, you know, even as he turned into a surly teenager, there was still this nature of, oh, well, I'm going to speak to these people because they were part of my past and part of my growing up. And so he made the effort. I used to love it when that teacher, Mrs. Gladstone, messaged me and said to me, he would still come when he came with one of his mates to pick up the younger siblings, would always come and have a conversation.
Beautiful.
And she wasn't even his teacher, you know. It was beautiful and it spoke volumes as to him, you know, and how he'd been brought up too. Yeah.
I knew.
Yeah. So high school, grade 7, you know, he struggled through, hated sport, which is pretty weird because of where we are and what he ended up with the anorexia. But yeah, no, not interested in sport. I'll never forget having a parent-teacher interview with his sports teacher who said to me, Ollie would only wear a formal uniform, never his sports uniform. And so this one day, this sports teacher, has decided that it's going to be kids in sports uniforms versus kids in their formal uniforms, and it's tag football. So there was, I think, about 6 of them that had formal uniforms on and the rest of the class in sports. So highly unfair, weighted-wise. So Ollie's spoken up because he's just that kid who's going to go, well, this isn't very fair. And so the teacher turned around to him and said, well, that's 100 push-ups, Ollie. He said, well, I'm not doing 100 push-ups. He said, well, you can have detention then. And Ollie goes, well, that's fine. I'll have detention. Then at detention time, this teacher says to him, if you run down and touch the fence at the back and run back, I'll let you off detention. No, I'll do detention. I'll do detention, thanks. And Ollie hated this HPE teacher with an absolute vengeance, right? And when I've had parent-teacher night, I said, oh, mate, my child really hates your guts. And I was totally honest with him. And he said, I just love the fact that he stands his ground, Mia. And you know, that he stood his ground. He wasn't going to do 100 push-ups. He wasn't going to run to the fence. He was going to do detention.
Yeah, I'll take the first
So he was respected because he stood firm on what he, you know, he believed, you know, bless his cotton socks. But it was never, I don't think the education system allows for our children of today. It's very different when we went to school. Now, oh, look, I don't think the education system suits our kids, to be quite honest, with all this neurodiversity and inclusion and everything that we've got going on. Kids all fit different molds, and Ollie wasn't neurodiverse or anything like that. We had him tested for ADHD and other things. He just, you know, wasn't interested, and he ended up disengaging because he used to say to me, why am I learning Japanese history, Mum? When am I ever going to use that in my day-to-day life?
Sounds so like mine. Yeah. And so true, right?
Yes, that's right. That's it, right. But I used to try and explain to him that in those earlier days of high school, you know, when I was in grade 8 and 9 even, you know, it was you're getting a taste of everything in order to make more informed decisions when you're older. But, of course, telling a, you know, then 13-year-old that, it's like in one ear and out the other. But I think high school was quite it was just challenging, and I think there was a lot more bullying going on at school than what I realised. So by the time he finished grade 7, we swing into grade 8, which was 2023, and 125 days off school. So I just could not get him back to school. You know, we'd been through COVID and stuff, and there was just no, I'm not going back. It was a constant fight to try and get him to go to school. When he did, he'd go for a few hours, and because we lived close by, he'd walk home. But again, honesty, this kid, the deputy principal would pull him out of class and go, Ollie, you're missing for the last couple of periods of school. And he goes, yeah, you can ring Mum. She knows I came home. And she even said that to me when I went to see her after he passed. She said, you know, he was never rude or disrespectful. It was always with respect, but he's like his mother. He just told it how it was, his authentic self. So by this stage, his father had tried to reach out to him again because he'd started high school in year 7. Ollie didn't want a bar of it. It got even more, well, why? Forgive me. We all do things wrong. He wouldn't even call him dad. He would call him by his name. And that berating him by text. And then in the end, I said, you need to block him, Ollie, because he's just wanting a response. So, so he did. But then I had this little boy who was going into grade 8, 2023. So he was 14, going on he's 14, and he then all of a sudden was worried about his body, how he looked. He didn't like himself. Wouldn't go to school.
Was that a gradual thing at the age of 14, or did you see? Were there particular signs or different?
I think the depression and anxiety had set in well and truly in primary school. And by the time we found him, we had a few different psychologists in our time because I'm too of the belief that if it's not working for you, you need to find someone who is working for you. And we finally found a psychologist, and it took us a long time to find her, who he just gelled with. And she was brilliant, like absolutely brilliant. When he was back in primary school, just before he started high school, again, we had tried to reach out to his father to see if he could see his brothers, and the answer was no. I was interstate at the time, and a friend was looking after him. The school has tried to get hold of me. They've got hold of me. My son had decided to try and cut himself because, again, that rejection, because he got told he couldn't see his brothers.
Where did he do that? At home?
No, at school with a pair of scissors across his arm. Like, not quite enough to penetrate the skin, but enough to scab it, So it was tiny bleeding. But it was that, again, rejection from his father saying you can't see your brothers. That didn't happen again at all, which was good. But it was like, okay, we're going back to the psychologist. We need to address this. We need to talk about it.
Did you ask him about that?
Yeah, I did. Ollie said it was. He said I did it because Dad said no. I can't see my brothers. That's why he did it. And so I got Ollie's coroner's report, as I told you, Lindsay, on my birthday of all things, and it literally states that in there that he did that because his father had said no, he couldn't see his brothers. It's in black and white in print, So high school years, tough for Ollie because he didn't fit the mould, I guess, and he challenged the status quo of, yes, Japanese history, why am I learning this, why am I learning that? He had an English teacher who he reckoned was too old, who still believed in capital punishment. I said, well, mate, I got the meter ruler across my bum a few times. I never got the cane though, but I said, I don't kind of disagree. I think, maybe they should bring back the cane to high schools. Some of these kids need a bloody good whip across the backsides. But he just struggled. And then by the time he went into grade 8, it was just, not at all interested. He was so disengaged. So I was looking at alternate methods to get him back into some sort of system of schooling. But the education system didn't help. Instead of coming to me and saying, here's what we can offer, distance education, Arethusa College, whatever it might look like. Instead, I was getting letters from the high school, threatening legal action if I didn't get my child back to school. The education legislation states, blah, 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 blah. Now, how is it going to help a single parent with an only child? I'm trying to work to keep a roof over our heads. I'm trying to manage a child who had clinical depression and anxiety. For me, how am I wasn't coping myself.
Yeah, and you don't need those threats on top of that. You need communication and let's work together and find a solution.
Yes. So finally, I ended up going, when we were back at the GP, I got a doctor's certificate and just sent that to the school and said, basically, get off my back.
Yeah.
Then I went and explored distance education. I explored Arethusa College. And in the end, I had booked him in to go to Arethusa for kids who have disengaged. And I actually liked it at Spring Hill, the campus up there. Yes, it was different. And when I first walked in there, I went, whoa, some of these kids. But, they're just expressing themselves too. And the high school had said, we're never this will always be his school if he wants to come back at some point in time. So again, if he had gone to Arethusa and we had made it that far, he probably might have swung back to Aspley. He still stayed in touch with all of his friends, all of them. Even though he wasn't going to school, he was staying in touch with his mates. And I used to love it because our cleaners used to come every second Thursday. And, of course, Ollie wouldn't be at school because he was retired, really. well, they used to walk in and Gerd, bless him, used to say to Ollie, "So, how's retirement treating you, Ollie?" And Elaine would come out of the bathroom with this mop of hair out of the drain and go, "Oliver, look at what I just pulled out of your bathroom drain." And go, "Oh, I'm sorry, Elaine, I really meant to clean that out before you got here." And so he was having great conversations with the cleaners every second Thursday. But he was disengaged. He wasn't sleeping at night. Yes, he did game as well. You know, all the kids do. Discord, I think, is one of the most poisonous platforms on the face of this earth. But, you know, he was just doing Ollie, you know, and I was doing the best I could as a mum to support him. I took him to the
on that, though, as well, mate, it's a real fine line, grey area with... I would imagine Ollie would go and, you know, I've got Charlie's 13. He's the same, loves his gaming with his few little friends. He's been unwell, as you know, and so that's his connection.
Yes.
I could never say to him, "No, that's it." I mean, don't get me wrong. I'll say, "Right, come on.
That's enough.
Buddy, enough. Let's go get some fresh air. Let's go whatever." But... I would imagine you with Ollie, that was his little, where probably switches off in a lot of ways, doesn't have to worry about anything. He's just playing his games, very innocent like. You know, for you to then say to him, "Ollie, no more gaming now, you're done."
I think, though, the problem with it was the bullying that was going on online.
Right, but you were aware of this.
I wasn't aware. I wasn't at first at all whatsoever. And...
Are these people he knew?
Yeah, people that he knew, and it's disgusting. So at the end of 2022, Ollie got sent 2 Snapchat messages from his so-called friends telling him to go kill himself. Now, he came into my bedroom visibly beside himself, showed me, and I said, "Can you screenshot those and send them to me, please?" "Oh, I can't screenshot them, Mum, because it will advise them that I've done that." So, "Well, give me your phone." And I took photos. Now, I had one of the mother's phone numbers, so I texted her and I said, "Hey, look, you know, I'm just letting you know there's been some online bullying going on this evening." Sent her the screenshots. I said, "I know you're going to say boys will be boys, but under no circumstances is it okay to tell another child to go kill themselves, because you do not know what's going on in their lives." So I had a child who couldn't switch off at night, so I had taken him to the GP to get him on some melatonin to help him sleep. It was at that point in time that we realised how much weight he'd lost. So he'd gone from 74 kilos in February to under 50 kilos by the time.
What was his height?
He was taller than me, so I'm 5'7", so he would have been getting close to 6 foot.
Wow.
And growing. You know, 14 years old, they just grow, you know, grow.
And all the hormonal changes and everything.
Yes, and he used to get upset because, you know, typical little boy, when they're little, they get a bit chunky, but then it's that growth spurt that comes. And I used to say to him all the time. Stop. I used to say to him all the time, your Uncle Travis, my younger brother, he was the same. And Travis is 6'3". So Ollie, he had monstrously big feet. So he was going to be a tall kid. So he was just shooting up. So he would chunk out, and then all of a sudden there'd be this massive growth spurt. There was not an ounce of fat on that kid. Now, I didn't see the weight loss because he was wearing big, baggy clothes.
As they do.
Yep, and hiding it. It wasn't until I noticed, and we'd had those first initial GP visits, that I noticed, okay, he's really conscious about what he's eating. So he went from eating everything. Now, he was the best eater as a baby as well. I used to love it. I'd post what my child had eaten on Facebook to make all the mothers jealous. I'm not going to apologise for that. I did it on purpose.
Yeah.
You know, he would eat curries, he would eat everything, and I never mashed everything up to a puree. It had texture, and I think that's where we go wrong as parents. We give these people this pureed mush, and these kids, when you do add texture, it's all of a sudden, oh, oh my gosh, I don't
Yeah.
like this. So he was the best eater ever. Curries, everything. Even when we went on holidays in New Zealand, he was only 3 years of age, and I took him to our fine dining silver service restaurant, and here's my little boy eating a steak and beans, and this couple like looking at me when we walked in as if to say, oh, you're bringing a child in here. And then they actually said to me, what a beautifully well-behaved child. I said, well, I saw the look you gave me when we walked in.
Yeah.
You know, I was like, seriously, great kid. To a child then who wouldn't eat any home-cooked meals, wouldn't eat his favourite spaghetti bolognese. When we went out to our favourite place, the farmhouse at Kedron, or we went to Oh Boy Bok Choy, where we're very well known because that's where we always spend our time, wouldn't eat. I'd eat, but he wouldn't. He just wouldn't eat.
What would he say?
He'll just sit there. He just wouldn't.
What would he say to you though?
Not hungry, Mum. I don't want anything. And even if I tried to push it, I don't want anything. So at home, he would make himself tuna, rice, and soy sauce.
So on a working day, which was most days for you, obviously trying to juggle being a mom and working full time, Ollie being at home, would he tell you he's eaten?
No, he just wouldn't. He would go the whole day and wait till I got home and then decide he's going to have some tuna and rice and a can of tuna, which tells you maybe there's 70 grams or 90 grams in the can. It didn't matter. He would pour it out on the scales and weigh it.
Wow.
He would weigh his rice. He would even weigh a drizzle of soy sauce, and he was tracking it all on a app similar to, I guess, MyFitnessPal. It wasn't MyFitnessPal, but it was similar too. So he'd eat
all
that.
the macros and everything.
Micros, and maintenance calories. That's what it was all about. And so for him, he would eat that, and then he would go, oh, Mum, I'm just going upstairs because I need to do a wee or whatever. And I'd think nothing of it. Although we had a toilet downstairs, so he could have been going downstairs to go to the toilet. I didn't realise he was going upstairs
to vomit.
Yep, to vomit. So it was that last GP visit. So we went from monthly GP visits to 3 week to weekly, basically. And it was the first weekly visit to the GP, and he had lost 2.75 kilos in a week.
Wow.
And we didn't even go home. It was straight up. And my GP, we were so lucky to have such a wonderful, wonderful GP who was all over it, because I was all over it and the psychologist was all over it. As a team, we worked so well together.
Was he admitting then that he was bulimic, that he was vomiting as well? Was he telling you that?
No, he wasn't telling me, you know. So with anorexia, it is they'll do everything they can do not to eat, but if they eat, that's what they'll do. They'll go up and purge. Bulimia is a bit different. They'll just eats like binge eating and then vomit. But and then ARFID, which I learnt about when I was working for Eating Disorders Families Australia. ARFID's a completely different eating disorder, where it's avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, which I'd never heard of before, but that goes along with, I guess, kids that are a bit neurodiverse and ADHD and texture. They won't eat because of the texture of foods. Ollie's was just purely control. He wanted to control something. Now, with an eating disorder, there's always a trigger. And in Ollie's case, the trigger was an absent parent and those difficult family dynamics.
Then thinking he can't control anything else in his life, but he can control
his food. Yep. That's exactly it. And so that's exactly what he was doing, much to his mother's, I don't know, surprise and trying to get my head around it. I was just, what is going on? You need to, and I would try and get him to eat. And then we went to see his psychologist one day, and he's obviously gone in and he said to her, Mum's on my back about eating. So I got called into the room, and the psychologist said, look, Ollie's feeling this way, because he wanted her to have that discussion with me. And bless his cotton socks, we got in the car to go home, and he said, Mum, thanks for not getting upset when she called you in